Okay, I think we are going to get started. So welcome and thank you for participating in the community meeting for the City of Buena Park's Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. Before we do get started, we want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and that we have translation services available for this meeting. Next slide, please. So we will be enabling a translation feature on Zoom, and once that is enabled, you will see an option called Interpretation at the bottom of your screen, and that button looks similar to the image on this screen. Please note that this feature might not be available if you've called in through your mobile phone or have an older version of Zoom. If you would like to hear the presentation in Spanish facilitated by Excel Interpreting, please click on the interpretation option and select Spanish. Otherwise, by default, you'll be hearing the presentation in English. Please also note that we have interpretation happening in real time, and we may need to pause at each slide until both presenters are done speaking. So the interpretation feature should now be on. If you have any questions using this feature, please message the meeting host. All right, next slide, please. So good evening, everyone. For this presentation, we will be referring to the Buena Park Climate Action and Adaptation Plan as both the CAAP or the plan. So I wanted to introduce you to some of our Buena Park CAAP team members presenting at this community meeting this evening. Starting off with the DUDEC technical team, we have Jennifer Reed, who is the project manager for the CAAP, Henry Eckold, the deputy project manager and a climate adaptation planner, and also Sarah Holterman, the Deputy Project Manager and Climate Action Planner. And my name is Shannon Heffernan. I'm also with DUDEC, and I'm leading the community outreach and engagement for this project. From the city, we have Lotus Tai, Buena Park Sustainability Manager, and DUDEC has been working closely with the city and Lotus on the Buena Park CAAP. Next slide, please. So let's discuss our meeting ground rules before we begin. By default, everyone on this webinar is muted, and towards the end of the presentation, we will have about 30 minutes for Q&A. If you have a question during the presentation, you could use the Zoom Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit a question or comment, and you could see what the icon looks like on the screen right now. Also, this is an interactive meeting where we will have a series of polling questions to get your input, and this is how we will be facilitating those. For each question, I will launch a Zoom poll that will pop up on your screen, and you could select your response on that poll and click submit. And please note that this feature might not be available if you've called in through your mobile phone or do not have the Zoom app installed. So next slide, Henry. Thank you. So let's give the polling a try. We're going to be launching our first Zoom poll question. This is where we really want to get to know the attendees on this webinar. We want to know your relationship with Buena Park, and you could select all that apply. So you have the option to select, I live here as a renter, I live here as a homeowner, I work here, I own a residential property or business here, or other. And if you select other, you could also provide a short answer response. Okay, so we can maybe give it about 10 more seconds as the responses come in. Okay. So I'm going to share the results with everyone. We have a lot of really great attendance tonight. We have around over 40 people participating in this webinar. And a lot of the attendees do own a home in Buena Park and live in Buena Park, as well as work within the city. And then I'm going to stop sharing the survey results. Okay, I also wanted to go over the agenda for this meeting. For the first 20 minutes of the webinar, DUDEC and the city will be providing context and background information on the Buena Park CAP, including the city's current emissions and their distribution. We will then discuss opportunities to reduce emissions by sector and increase resiliency. And this part of the meeting will include interactive polling to get your input on some of the actions and opportunities for greenhouse gas emission reduction. As I mentioned, we then will have about 30 minutes of Q&A where we will invite you to share your questions and provide feedback. In addition to providing input during this meeting, there are additional opportunities to ask questions and share your feedback. City staff have virtual office hours in February, and you can visit buenapark.com/sustainability to register for these office hours. In addition, there's also a form at the bottom of that webpage where you could provide your contact information for project updates. So with that, let's get started with an overview of the Buena Park CAP. I'm going to hand it over to Buena Park's Sustainability Manager, Lotus Tai.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is Lotus. I am the Sustainability Manager for the City of Buena Park. We are now going to provide a short background of the city's approach to sustainability, the CAP, including what it is, the difference between action versus adaptation, draft greenhouse gas emission inventories, climate vulnerabilities, outreach, and timeline. Next slide. Just because this is the city's first CAP doesn't mean that the city hasn't been working on environmental sustainability projects. We have over 300 climate-related policies, actions, and strategies, like our local hazard mitigation plan, which lays out what we need to do when a disaster strikes. The city also has a Climate Action Commission, which is made of 5 residents that work with staff to develop programs and inform the community on rebates, incentives, and more. We are also part of the Orange County Power Authority to provide renewable clean energy. And we recently launched our new Buena Park Sustainabuddies on the bottom of the screen. They are our new environmental ambassadors. We've got Tidy the trash can, Lumi the LED light bulb, Earthy, Trace the carbon footprint, and Ripple the raindrop. You'll start to see them around the city promoting sustainability programs.
Next slide. Great. So this CAP is the city's first climate action plan. It's the city's first climate adaptation plan and therefore the first climate action and adaptation plan. But as Lotus mentioned, while this is the city's first climate-related plan, the city has made great strides in implementing policies and programs to enhance sustainability and community safety and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This CAP builds upon the city's strong foundation by packaging all the climate actions into one easy-to-follow plan, including the addition of targeted actions identified during this process, which is the focus of today. The ultimate goals of this plan is to reduce the city's greenhouse gas emissions and create a more resilient community that can adapt to the effects of climate change. Next slide, please. But before we get further, first let's just define what action and adaptation mean. Action is reducing greenhouse gas emissions generated by the city that contribute to climate change. And adaptation is managing the impacts of climate change on the city. By combining action and adaptation in one plan, we can synergize our efforts and use the city's resources efficiently. As the Buena Park CAP addresses both action and adaptation, it will inventory the city's current greenhouse gas emissions from both municipal government and the community to understand the sources and associated magnitude of greenhouse gas emissions. This is the foundation for identifying actions the city and community can take to reduce those greenhouse gas emissions. It will also identify local and regional climate impacts and evaluate the city's vulnerability to those impacts. And then this background assessment will provide the foundation for potential adaptation actions to increase resilience and capacity to respond to these impacts among community members. And that brings us to what we are doing today. We are here to share the city's greenhouse gas reduction and adaptation goals and provide these draft tailored actions to meet these goals for your consideration and feedback. After we identify the comprehensive set of actions, our plan will provide recommendations for implementation, including metrics to track ongoing progress, as well as potential policies and funding sources to accomplish greenhouse gas reduction and adaptation actions. Next slide, please, and I'll pass it to Sarah.
Thank you, Jen. So a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, as Jen just introduced, is a snapshot of the greenhouse gas emissions associated within a geographic boundary. So in this case, the city of Buena Park, during a given time period. Establishing a baseline inventory of greenhouse gas emissions is an important initial step, both for its function as a point of reference for subsequent inventories to track progress and for forecasting future emissions. The Buena Park CAAP will include 2 greenhouse gas emissions inventories, community-wide and municipal. The community-wide inventory shown here includes the greenhouse gas emissions within the city's direct or indirect jurisdictional control. The inventory includes emissions from activities associated with the city's residents, businesses, and visitors. The largest sources of emissions are on-road transportation, which is passenger vehicles and trucks and other vehicles traveling within the city, and energy use, which is emissions mostly from the use of electricity and natural gas in home and businesses for lighting, appliances, and heating and cooling. The community-wide inventory also includes emissions from use of off-road equipment, such as landscaping equipment, water use and wastewater treatment, as well as emissions from solid waste disposal. Development of the baseline inventory is a necessary first step also for setting reduction targets and to help understand the measures needed to achieve those targets. In looking at the inventory here on the slide, we know that efforts to reduce emissions from transportation and energy use in particular will be important to achieving the city's goals, although efforts to reduce emissions from all sources are considered and included in the plan. Next slide, please. So the municipal inventory shown here is limited to emissions generated by city government operations and from city-owned buildings and facilities. Sources of emissions in the municipal inventory include water use, wastewater treatment, city operational waste, city vehicle fleet, city employee commute, city-owned off-road equipment use, and energy use for streetlights and in city-owned buildings and facilities. By establishing a municipal inventory, the city can identify its own footprint and better lead the emission reduction effort by example. It's important to note that the municipal inventory is not necessarily additive to the community inventory, as most of these emissions, at least some, are already captured in the community inventory. This inventory is separate and it's to more specifically identify and tailor reduction efforts for city government operations. Next slide. This slide provides the community and municipal inventory on the right for the city of Buena Park relative to the state's most recent inventory, which is shown on the left for comparison. Buena Park represents less than 1% of the statewide emissions, but follows a fairly similar emissions profile. In cars per year, the state's emissions are the equivalent of 86 million cars driven per year versus the 140,000 car per year equivalent for the city's inventory. Similar to the city inventory, the largest sources of emissions at the state level are from on-road transportation and energy use. Given the similar emissions breakdown, the city will benefit from many of the existing and future state programs and legislative actions that will reduce emissions from these specific sources. Next slide, please. Passing this off to Henry.
Thank you, Sarah. So now I'll get into climate adaptation. So I'll provide an overview of climate vulnerabilities in Buena Park. But I want to start by voicing support for anyone affected by the recent Los Angeles wildfires. It's a devastating situation, and I hope that everyone involved is receiving the resources that they need. But looking to Buena Park, with regard to climate-related hazards, the primary hazard directly impacting community members in Buena Park is extreme heat. and this is an emerging hazard. So historically, only about 3 extreme heat days occurred annually, which is projected to more than triple by 2050. That's what you see on the graphic on the right. And it's projected to be on average between 14 and 24 days per year by 2085, depending on global greenhouse gas emissions. Wildfires are a hazard impacted by climate change. Although for Buena Park and this planning effort, projected impacts from wildfires and many other hazards are more indirect. So the city's well located and avoids a lot of hazard zones that are impacted by climate change. So areas that are projected to flood and areas with high fire hazards are located primarily outside of the city. And that doesn't mean that there won't be indirect impacts felt. Things such as air quality issues from wildfire smoke or additional housing demand, are things that can impact the city in the future. And now I'll pass it over to Shannon.
Thanks, Henry. I wanted to just summarize our outreach process, and a successful CAAP and implementation of its policies, programs, and actions does require community collaboration and engagement. And to ensure that Buena Park's CAAP reflects the needs and priorities of the city's diverse stakeholders, DUDEC and the city prioritized outreach and engagement for this project. Our outreach efforts focused on education to have informed conversations with the community and also meeting the community where they are to provide convenient opportunities for feedback. So I wanted to highlight some of the outreach activities. We had community pop-ups. Our team engaged Buena Park residents at summer concerts in the park, sharing information about the Buena Park CAAP and the city's ongoing sustainability initiatives. And these pop-ups allowed us to learn about the challenges residents face in changing their behaviors to reduce their emissions. We've also had online surveys, and through online surveys, we were really able to broaden our outreach and gather insights into the barriers that the community has in changing their behaviors. We also learned about the measures that Buena Park businesses currently have in place to reduce their emissions. And then this community engagement meeting tonight is really another crucial step in the planning process where we would like your feedback on potential actions and measures. And we just really wanted to thank everyone who has participated in our outreach efforts so far. With over 600 responses, your input has really been valuable in developing the Buena Park CAAP. And next slide, please. I also just wanted to quickly go over the project timeline. The City of Buena Park and DUDEC have been working on the Buena Park CAAP since spring of 2024 and conducting community outreach since summer of 2024. During summer and fall, the DUDEC technical team prepared the city's greenhouse gas inventory and conducted the vulnerability assessment. And now as we enter into winter 2025, we are gathering community feedback on actions and measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then in the spring, we will have both the draft of the CAAP and the CEQA document, since this is going to be a CEQA qualified CAAP. And then we will have a final plan this summer. So now I'm going to turn it over to the project manager, Jen Reed.
Great. Thank you so much, Shannon. I hope all that background provides a helpful basis for the next part of our presentation, which is focused on the draft opportunities, measures, and actions identified to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase resiliency. Next slide, please. But it's important to take a moment to discuss the state regulatory framework for greenhouse gas reductions. A goal of this CAAP is to align with statewide greenhouse gas reduction goals, and there are 3 bills that establish key milestones for the state. First is Assembly Bill 32, which was enacted in 2006. Assembly Bill 32 provided initial direction on creating a comprehensive multi-year statewide greenhouse gas reduction and set the goal of reducing statewide greenhouse gas emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. Next is Senate Bill 32. Enacted in 2016, this sets a goal of reducing statewide greenhouse gas emissions 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. So that's one of the first milestones that we're going to look to in the CAAP. The most recent is Assembly Bill 1279, enacted in 2023, and that one sets two goals for the state. One is reducing statewide anthropogenic, that means human-caused, greenhouse gas emissions to at least 85% below 1990 levels by 2045. And the second goal is to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible, but no later than 2045, and achieve and maintain net negative greenhouse gas emissions thereafter. Of the two Assembly Bill 1279 targets, the one relevant to climate action planning is reducing the human-caused greenhouse gas emissions to 85% below 1990 levels by 2045, because that is what the city generally has jurisdictional control over. So the 2030 goal established in Senate Bill 32 will also be the key goal of the CAAP, and the 2045, 85% below 1990 levels is the second goal. Next slide, please.
Okay, now regarding climate adaptation and state regulations, the primary climate adaptation law that applies to Buena Park is Senate Bill 379. This requires that cities develop vulnerability assessments, which identify changes in hazards and areas and people that are most at risk to those hazards. Cities also need to develop policy to then address those issues. And then I also want to note that there are, again, several existing city documents that overlap with climate adaptation and will be woven into the CAAP to be consistent. Again, primarily the safety element and the local hazard mitigation plan, and then also documents like the urban water management plan and urban forestry management plan.
All right, before we discuss our CAAP actions, I wanted to provide an overview of how the actions are organized. With such ambitious goals, there are a lot of things cities have to do, and this list can get very long, so it's important to provide a manageable structure to efficiently achieve the city's collective climate goals. The roadmap for the Buena Park CAAP implementation is organized within a tiered framework, including three main components: opportunity areas, measures, and actions. Opportunity areas are the first tier and reflect the main greenhouse gas emission source and adaptation sectors where meaningful change can be made. Measures are the second tier of the implementation framework and are contained within each opportunity to further specify the specific goals. The high-level story of the CAAP can often be told at the measure level, and that will be a focus for today. Actions are the final tier of the implementation framework and include specific policies, programs, plans, initiatives, or tools that will be deployed to achieve the express goals of the related measure and opportunity. Next slide, please, to Sarah.
Thanks. So as discussed previously, the municipal inventory specifically includes greenhouse gas emissions related to the city's government operations. So the municipal measures shown here are those that will specifically reduce emissions from the city government operations and enhance resiliency within those operations. Given that the largest emission sources are on-road transportation and energy, the low-hanging fruit will be measures to address emissions from the city's vehicle fleet and employee commute, as well as those to reduce use of energy in city-owned buildings and facilities. There are measures to address emissions from each of the sources in addition to on-road transportation and energy use, including water use, solid waste, and off-road equipment. The measures also include ways to enhance carbon sequestration in the city's public spaces and ways to address adaptation and resiliency within city operations. By having separate reduction and adaptation measures specific to municipal operations, the city is hoping to lead by example and demonstrate their dedication to reaching the climate goals. Next slide, please.
All right, our first opportunity is transportation, which covers our largest greenhouse gas emission sector. So it is a grand opportunity to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There are two general buckets of transportation reduction measures, and the CAAP will address both. The first way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles is to reduce the number of trips or vehicle miles traveled, which is often referred to as VMT. The second way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles is to switch from fossil fuel to cleaner fuels, specifically electric vehicles, as electricity can be provided by a clean, renewable source. And this slide discusses the first pathway, which is reducing vehicle miles traveled. The key measures identified to achieve vehicle miles traveled reductions includes enhancing an active transportation environment, reducing single occupancy vehicle trips, optimizing land use to minimize commute distances, and incentivizing use of public transit. Actions under vehicle miles traveled reduction that we wanted to highlight today to help explain how the city will make progress under this opportunity area include installing new bike and pedestrian facilities in partnership with the city's active transportation plan, developing a commute reduction program with incentives, changing zoning to allow for increased residential and job density, and enhancing transit opportunities. Next slide, please. Reducing vehicle miles traveled is very important and results in numerous co-benefits, but it alone will not achieve the necessary reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector that the city will need. So after you incorporate all feasible VMT reduction measures, the next step in is the transition of vehicles from fossil fuels like gasoline and diesel to electric vehicles. And the key measure under this opportunity is just that. Let's encourage transition to electric vehicles. And we understand that vehicle transition cannot be mandated and it does take time to happen, but the city can take strides in facilitating and encouraging the switch through actions such as installing electric vehicle charging at non-residential public areas, developing incentive programs for building owners to install EV chargers, and requiring new residential and commercial development to install EV chargers. Next slide, please. That brings us to our second poll.
Great, thank you. I could launch our second community poll. Let me pull that right up. Okay, so we wanted to just get some community feedback on what alternatives to individual vehicle travel are you interested in, given proper infrastructure and incentives. And this is a question where you can select all that apply. So we have bicycle, walking, carpooling or van pooling, and then transit. So I'm going to give it a couple more seconds for everyone to share their responses. Okay, we have a few more seconds. Okay. Um, all right. I think we have about 74% participation on this question. So if anyone just wants to submit their response, there we go. Okay. All right, I'm going to end the poll. So a lot of really great feedback on this question. I'm going to share the results with everyone. A lot of interest in biking, walking, and also transit. Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the second opportunity, energy, addresses greenhouse gas emissions from the second largest sector, which includes use of electricity and natural gas. Similar to the transportation opportunity that Jen introduced, there are two main pathways to reducing emissions from energy use, including reducing the use of energy through efficiency measures and actions, and by upgrading and switching to low or zero emission energy sources. This slide includes our measure to reduce the use of energy, which will be accomplished through increasing energy efficiency in buildings. The key actions to achieve this measure are highlighted here and include city-specific standards requiring exceedance of Title 24 standards in new buildings and incentives for existing owners to retrofit with energy-efficient upgrades. Next slide, please. The second opportunity, and then on this slide, we have our measures to reduce emissions through upgrades to low or zero carbon fuels. Low carbon fuel measures include those to electrify buildings, increase renewable energy generation and storage within the city, and procuring zero carbon electricity. Some example actions to achieve these measures are listed here and include requiring all new buildings to include only electric end uses, incentives for replacement of natural gas appliances in existing buildings, and incentives for installation of renewable energy systems, such as rooftop solar in existing buildings. Next slide, please.
Okay, great. We're going to launch our third community poll. So which of these actions are you interested in if you had incentives? And this is a select all that apply question. So we have solar installation, energy efficient upgrades, and then the swapping of appliances. Okay, I think we could give it a couple more seconds. We have about 60% participation on this question. Okay. A few more seconds if anyone wants to submit their response, if they haven't already. All right, I'm going to end this poll and share the results. So a lot of support for energy efficient upgrades, followed by the swapping of appliances and then solar installation, but everything was also pretty close.
Okay,
All right,
great.
thank you.
So then moving on to water opportunities. The greenhouse gas emissions from water use within the city is related to energy needed for extraction, conveyance, and distribution of water to residents and businesses. Measures proposed to reduce emissions from water use in the city include those to reduce water consumption and to promote water reuse. The actions that accomplish these include installation of water efficient appliances like low flow faucets and shower heads, incentives for gray water systems, which include systems to collect and filter water from showers and sinks for non-potable uses, and drought tolerant landscaping. Next slide, please.
Great, and then we're going to launch our fourth poll. So this question is, which of these actions are you interested in if you had incentives? And this is another one with for select all that apply. We have gray water systems, rain barrels, water efficient appliance upgrades, and then drought tolerant landscaping. Okay, maybe we could give it about 10 more seconds for everyone to submit their responses. Okay, I'm going to end this poll, and then I'm going to share our results. So a lot of support for drought tolerant landscaping. This is actually something that we also heard through our community outreach during our pop-up events and also through our online surveys. Also rain barrels and water efficient appliance upgrades, as well as some support also for gray water systems. Okay.
Great. And so the solid waste opportunity we have pictured here, greenhouse gas emissions from solid waste occurs from the city's solid waste breaking down and releasing methane in landfills. To reduce the city emissions from solid waste, the CAAP will include actions to reduce the amount of waste that we send to landfills. Example actions that will help reduce the generation of solid waste in the community include education programs on proper waste sorting and composting, signage on proper sorting at local businesses, and resources to encourage reuse, rentals, and reduction in consumption. Next slide, please.
So the next opportunity area is off-road equipment. So off-road equipment can be used during construction, operation at an industrial site, such as a forklift at a warehouse, and at residential and commercial areas for landscape maintenance. The city is making great strides in transitioning lawn equipment to electric, which this opportunity will build from. But there are additional off-road sources in the city that this opportunity aims to address. And the measure is collectively increasing electric and zero emission off-road and landscaping equipment adoption. And actions to achieve this measure include implementing the city's electric lawn equipment transition plan for businesses and residents, incentivizing zero emission construction equipment, and transitioning operational off-road equipment to zero emissions. Next slide, please.
So now we will cover the people and community opportunity. This primarily covers aspects of climate adaptation or action that don't fit within the other sort of sector-based opportunities. And I'll go through the measures so you can see what I mean. First, we have preparing vulnerable communities for hazards. So this is really focused on engagement with community members and education. The next measure is creating resilient public gathering spaces. So you can see an example of that is the highlighted action associated, and it is to increase accessibility and promote the use of cooling centers. So things like amenities at the cooling centers or programming can do that. The third measure is to improve equitable distribution of resources. So that's focusing on some of the specific groups in Buena Park that may require assistance or incentives to receive resilience improvements. So for example, one group could be renters. In the second highlighted action, that's focused on rental units and engaging with property owners directly or providing resources for renters to be able to advocate for themselves. And then moving on, here are three more people and community measures. So this begins with educate and incentivize responsible consumption, which has to do with personal consumption and purchasing. Second is collaborate to improve regional resilience and greenhouse gas reduction efforts. This is really focused on partnerships for things that require a multi-jurisdictional approach. So sometimes hazards are best approached with multiple jurisdictions or regional agencies. And then the last people and community measure is spark sustainable economic development. So below are a couple of highlighted actions related to this measure, including developing a program that would recognize sustainable businesses and promoting workforce development training related to climate action and adaptation topics. So for things like energy and green building, for example.
All right, I'm going to launch our next poll. Our question is, imagine your home without air conditioning during a extreme heat event. What would entice you to go to a cooling center? Select all that apply. So food or kitchen facilities, if it was located closer to where I live, if it provided entertainment or programming, a space that my pet would be allowed, and I'll prefer to visit a business instead of a community center. Okay, we could give it maybe 15 more seconds for everyone to submit their feedback. Okay, I'm going to end our poll and share our results. So a lot of interest in if it were located closer to where I live, if the space allowed my pet as well. And then also food or kitchen facilities, and then I would prefer to visit a business instead of a community center. All right.
Okay. So while previous greenhouse gas emission opportunities that we've discussed tonight focused on the reduction or elimination of sources of emissions, the natural and urban land opportunity includes carbon dioxide removal efforts, which is a mechanism of drawing down existing carbon from the atmosphere. As shown on this slide, the proposed measure includes natural carbon sequestration efforts and support of urban greening. The highlighted actions include use of nature-based solutions in new and existing development, coordination with schools to develop an urban greening education program, and expanding the existing community garden program within the city. And this slide wraps up our review of the opportunity areas of the CAAP. And so with that, I'm going to pass it back to Shannon.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. I wanted to just launch our final community poll for the evening before we have a Q&A. But this question is, how would you like to be involved in the CAAP process? And this is a select all that apply. So help spread the word, voluntarily implement the changes in my own home or business, change the way I travel to and from places. And then we also have an other option if you want to select that and provide a short answer as well. Okay, I think we could maybe give it about 15 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So a lot of interest and support for voluntarily implementing changes in my own home or business, helping spread the word, which we also really appreciate, and then also some support for changing the way I travel to and from places. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the poll. So before we move on to the Q&A portion of our meeting, I want to share a reminder of the webinar ground rules. All of the questions must be submitted using the Zoom Q&A feature, and our goal is to make sure all of the questions are answered. If we are unable to get to your question this evening, we will definitely be following up. And if you would like to share additional feedback, you could sign up for office hours with city staff, and you could visit buenapark.com/sustainability to register. Okay, we have received a couple of questions. So I think the first one, will the presentation be available to us? We will be posting the presentation on the city's webpage at buenapark.com/sustainability. So that's something that you will have access to.
If it's okay, we can jump into the first live Q&A, and I'm just going to pass it to Michael Hendricks, who is on our team, and he is
If you
a
have
CAP
questions,
expert.
let me know and I'll.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Michael, so the question was, did we consider remote work in this area?
So there had been some surveys and actually data provided between 2020 and 2022 on remote working. And it turns out that people, while it significantly reduces commute trips and the vehicle miles traveled associated with that, people tended to increase their personal trips. So they go see the kids play baseball at Little League practice. They'd go to dance lessons. They did other personal things that actually increased VMT for that household. So that is why it's not one of the actions or measures within the on-road opportunity.
Great, thank you, Michael. That brings us to our next question, which I can help answer, and I welcome Lotus to jump in as well. So it says, is the drought-tolerant landscaping aspect to allow residents to have this currently not allowed? We're supposed to have lawns or just for on city properties? And yes, we will, the city, as part of the CAP, will look into allowing residents to have drought-tolerant landscaping. So it's something that we will be looking into as part of this CAP process. All right. And the next one says OC Power has a program in place to recognize green businesses that Buena Park could partner with them. Also on the survey for this should be free high-speed Wi-Fi and lots of plugs. So I think this is a great suggestion and maybe not a question to answer, but thank you so much. And we will definitely consider this as we go forward. And then the next question is, when does the city anticipate being able to complete and adopt the CAP? I can help answer that one. The draft will be being released in spring, and we anticipate completing the final CAP and moving towards the next fun step of implementation in the summer of 2025. I can read the next question and I can pass it to Shannon to answer if we're ready for this one. What is being done to get youth involved? They will be most affected.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So we've had conversations with the youth as part of our community engagement. Um, we had a lot of conversations with youth over the summer as part of our summer concert series pop-ups, where we were able to capture their input. In addition, we also had shared a community survey, really understanding the barriers to switching behaviors, which included some youth participation as well.
All right. If the panelists don't mind, I'm just going to keep going down the Q&A that I'm seeing. And then if you are interested in answering, just go ahead and jump on in. We had a follow-up. It says the area was to reduce trips. I think this may be in response to the remote work question.
That's right.
Okay.
So it's counterintuitive, but remote working actually freed people up and they increased their trips, which is great for people's personal lives and that work-life balance, but does not help us reduce VMT.
All right.
Jen, I wanted to quickly follow up
Great.
on a comment that Lotus, the city's sustainability manager, had made as it relates to the question in engaging the youth in the Climate Action Adaptation Plan. The city also has plans to work with the Buena Park school districts as an additional way to conduct outreach and to involve the youth as well. So just wanted to share that note that Lotus had added.
Perfect. Thank you, Shannon. Next question. Do we have drought resistant landscaping program available? I know this is something that we've heard from the community as part of our outreach process, and something that we are also considering as part of our actions to develop some off-the-shelf resources for the community who are interested in doing that. So that's one of our draft actions for consideration right now. All right. Next one, this is a good question. Is a building performance standard being considered for electrification given the Berkeley ruling? So we've definitely been tracking the Berkeley ruling and what it means for cities and counties who have climate goals that involve electrification of new buildings, as well as promoting and encouraging electrification of existing buildings. The truth is that when you aim to meet the ambitious statewide goals, some major changes have to be made. And one of them is switching from natural gas to electricity, because while electricity, we're not 100% clean now, that is the direction that we are going. At least that's our goal to hit in 2045. So we need to build new development now that facilitates being consistent with that goal in the future. So we are definitely considering electrification as part of this CAAP. How that is worded and how that is implemented, meaning an ordinance or regulation or incentive, though that's still in discussions. If Michael or Sarah have anything to add there.
I think that was great. Thanks, Jen.
Okay.
It is a tricky one to navigate.
It is tricky, but important to navigate. Yeah. All right, next question. With regard to community measures, how will you plan to include multifamily apartment and condominium complexes? So think about that. Go ahead.
I can start off with that one, just in regards to the community inventory. Getting to a granular level, we are able to separate out single family from multifamily homes with energy use. And so that's a good first step in understanding what the emissions profile is for those two types of residences. Community measures in this regard will look like incentivizing building owners to increase efficiency measures and supply EV charging infrastructure, stuff like that.
And I think adding on to that, I mean, there's renters and then there's owners of condos, right? So and then there's the property owners as well if it is a multifamily that's being rented. So there are multiple sort of avenues that could be gone about to connect with multifamily apartment owners, renters, or condo owners, and so some of them might be direct engagement, whereas others might be broader, you know, connections with the community.
All right, and we hope we are answering your questions fully. If there is something that we missed, feel free to follow up in the Q&A, and hopefully we can get back to it. And of course, if we don't get to all your questions today, we are available in the process to follow up and make sure that all your questions are answered. So the next one is the public needs to be informed about how driving increases greenhouse gases and is the biggest factor involved.
I agree.
Totally agree.
Please tell your friends to read the CAAP. That'll be definitely a message that is conveyed in the CAAP. It'll be a big piece of our reduction efforts. But definitely agree. Sorry, Jen, if you had more to add there.
No, I was just going to say, you know, this is the same for every city and county in the state, but in our experience, there is definitely really good opportunity within the city of Buena Park to reduce VMT. and trips, and we have identified a pretty big suite of VMT reduction measures working with our partner Fair and Peers, and we're excited to present all those to you. And then the follow-up was for the cooling center survey. Oh, the Wi-Fi for the cooling center survey. Yes, that's a great one. That will certainly be important. Henry, anything to add there? I'm not sure if that's probably a minimum requirement for some of these centers.
Yeah, no, it's a great addition.
All right, great. Next one. How does food waste, especially with grocery stores and restaurants, figure into this?
Yeah, I can start off if Michael wants to jump in, or Jen. So with SB 1383, there are existing regulations for food waste from producers, from restaurants and other locations. This will probably come in the form of a community measure of just helping these locations to better comply with. I know a lot of jurisdictions are having trouble catching up and complying with SB 1383, which is the short-lived climate pollutant regulation requiring waste to be reused. And so a measure will just be in there, hopefully, to assist with this. I don't know if Michael, if you have anything to add.
Sure, I was going to say that the regulation you're talking about requires the city to divert food waste from landfills and to either composting facilities, or for food waste that is actually still edible, like the fruit that's just not perfect at the grocery store, to divert that to other programs that can provide food, like homeless shelters and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's divided into those two broad categories: edible food waste, which should be recycled in a way that allows people to take advantage of that, versus non-edible food waste, which goes to composting.
Great, thank you. All right. The next one is a comment more than a question, but it's a good one. I wish there were more recycling centers, places in business for batteries, electric appliances, et cetera. We can definitely take that into consideration when developing the actions to make electronic waste disposal more or easier to do. All right. Okay, the next one, it's an anticipated question. The current grid can't handle the power needed now. All of your proposals will crash the grid and cause blackouts. This is based on a survey of 600 people of 80,000 in BPK and not viable. And even the feds dropped the 2045 EV mandate. Invite Michael to respond, and I can respond as well.
Sure. Well, the feds dropped the 2045 EV mandate because of the current administration, and I'll just leave that right there. As far as the grid not handling it, the state is working with public utilities and private utilities to upgrade the grid to accommodate the increased need that we have. In many cases, undergrounding the grid so we don't have as prone to fire. There's a lot of work to be done on the electric grid, as you know. Our job as local residents and the city is to set ourselves up for a low carbon future, with the anticipation that the state and the utilities will take care of the grid. We don't have control of that.
Great, thank you, Michael. Next one is any plans on community energy generation like solar farms? So currently in our measures, we do have a goal to increase renewable energy generation and storage. Those can be things like streamlining city permitting for installation of renewable energy generation systems, an ordinance for increasing solar panel for new construction, promoting installation of on-site renewable systems with existing buildings, and providing technical assistance and education programs on the benefits of paired rooftop solar and battery systems. So right now, based on the built-out nature of the city, we haven't identified a large solar farm. The better option is likely having community solar, like rooftop solar on individual homes and buildings, hopefully paired with a battery as well. But Sarah or Michael, anything to add to that?
Sure, I was going to say that distributed solar, in other words, rooftop solar, is a really viable option in Buena Park. What it does is it not only provides locally generated electricity, it also makes those buildings that it's on, along with the batteries contained within it, more resilient to climate change issues. So when you have power safety shutoffs, those kinds of things, you still have electricity if you have local rooftop solar.
Awesome. And the next question is there a city plan to plant more trees in residential parkways? Sarah or Henry,
Yeah,
want to take that one?
I can start this one off if anyone wants to add to it. The city does have a current urban forest management plan. I believe it's from 2010, but it includes recommendations on where there's opportunity areas to plant trees and what type of trees should be planted. I don't know if this particular question was getting at specifically in residential areas, but that management plan is for public areas. And so that is being considered and looked at as part of the plan.
All right. Okay, next one is OC Power is looking at incentives for multifamily dwellings as well. Are you partnering or communicating with them around these ideas? And I know that I don't think Lotus can answer these questions right now, but I know that the city has been working closely with OC Power, and we have definitely already identified them as a partner in implementing the CAP. Anyone have anything to add to that one?
I'll just add that beyond just, I guess, incentives for multifamily dwellings, partnerships with regional agencies are a great way to communicate the programs that are already going on in the area. Things like air purifiers. There are a lot of programs for that as well, and so that is certainly part of implementing this plan is working with all of the regional agencies that are also working on this.
All right. Just checking our time. Okay, we're 6 minutes past 7, so plenty of time for more questions. If you want to keep coming them in, and we'll do our best to answer them here. And of course, if there's any that we can't, we'll follow up. This is from Mayor Joyce on here. Thank you for the opportunity to learn more about the CAP, and thank you for joining us tonight. She says, I keep erasing my questions as they're already questioned and answered. So great questions from the group participating. And can we look into the city-involved solar roofing options and incentives, adding partnerships and grants into the picture? Yes, absolutely. One of the goals of the CAP and one of the main reasons a lot of cities and lead agencies put together a CAP is it's a great opportunity to pursue grants and get funding. So you have your plan first, and then you can get funding to implement your plan, but you got to have your plan set. So we'll definitely consider partnerships, financing, funding, grants in how we can help the city implement and meet their goals. You guys can always jump in. Should I move to the next one?
Yes.
All right. Okay. This one's about waste. So it says, I think we are all missing how much waste is coming from those businesses. And I believe this is a reference to the previous question about grocery stores and restaurants. Compared to the square miles, hundreds percent or more can contribute. They are concerned as well. So I think this is a comment emphasizing how much waste is generated from a certain subset of buildings. And I think they are acutely aware of that as well. And we can consider having an action to support those businesses in the city and reducing their waste.
And one thing I'd like to add, the state mandate is really focused on those kinds of businesses. So requiring grocery stores to divert edible food to the appropriate place rather than just throwing it away.
Right. Very hard to do, but a great goal that everyone's trying
Yeah.
to figure out right now. So more to come on that. Next question, is the city planning on planting more street trees to support carbon sequestration? I'll pass it to our carbon sequestration expert.
Yeah, I think we touched on this a bit with another question, but in the plan, we will be looking at the past efforts, so the urban tree planting master plan, and bringing that in and taking those recommendations and looking at that for the natural and urban greening opportunity area. The answer is yes. We need to get our emission reductions where we can get them, and that's definitely a great way.
All right. Okay.
And then this next question says, why can't the city opt out of AB 32 and SB 32 requirements? Do we believe that BPK can make a dent in GHG after the wildfires?
Can I answer that?
Sure.
So the temptation is to give up. China's making too much emissions. Other people are making too much emissions. Volcanoes are making too much emissions. The focus here is on our own footprint, not everybody else's. So trying to be as efficient as we can, trying to reduce our emissions where we can. There is a tremendous amount of co-benefits that go into the local community by doing this, that totally, in addition to reducing the GHGs that would normally be there, also increase the livability and vibrancy of the life in Buena Park. So we need to really focus on Buena Park and what we can do and how we can do it in a way that elevates our communities, that increases our economic vibrancy, those kinds of things. Just keep your focus on what you have control on and not worry so much about what China's doing or what the latest wildfire is burning. Focus on what you can do.
I like that, Michael. All right. This next one's a comment follow-up, says, yep, Michael, you're right. Political will just got hobbled. However, I believe if sustainability efforts just plug along, there will be successes.
I agree. We
Yeah.
need to do what we can. The federal government's likely to take away that $7,000 incentive for buying an EV, but there are other co-benefits to having EVs. And I suspect right now EVs represent 10% of the new car market. That market is emerging and growing just because of demand, not simply because of federal offsets or incentives.
Great. Thank you. We did have a question from the room, and I'll see if Michael can help with this one as well. If we go all electric, don't we have to rewire our homes? It's not just installing panels. This isn't cheap. It seems like a lofty goal.
The existing built environment is a big consideration, and this is long term. We're looking at 2045. So near term, is looking at what the city can do, retrofitting buildings to have rooftop solar, to have battery backups. You don't have to rewire your home, but you may have to add those things to your home. So how we do that in a way that benefits all of us. Long term, we are going to have that all in place, the existing buildings as well as the new ones.
All right. Let's see, where did we leave off? Next one. Are microgrids being considered within the city? We currently don't have that as an action, but it's one that we can consider.
Microgrids are also really good for better resiliency of local communities. And just think for those homeowners that are considering solar, including battery backup and other amenities, you can literally make your home a microgrid if you do it right.
All right. This is a modern day question. Two of the biggest energy hogs that exist are crypto mining and AI. Are there any efforts to minimize their impact in the energy sector? And I think I would like to take this moment to pass it to Michael to explain the idea of jurisdictional control when developing a CAP and the goals of, what emission sources that we can either control or influence. And that's the biggest focus.
So yeah, crypto mining and data centers are a huge energy user. Requiring them to have solar to offset their emission sources is something the state is looking at already. So expect that in Title 24 updates. As far as the city of Buena Park, I'm not sure. We would have to look and see if we have any of those locally that the city has jurisdictional control over. But like I say, we do have limits. We can't eliminate data centers. We all love the cloud, but we can certainly make them more efficient and certainly offset their electric use by requiring them to generate their own electricity.
Awesome. All right. This one says, I also heard that there's a lot of food wasted in the school as part of the lunch snack program, as kids are not eating them or wasting them. And that's a great comment, and we'll take that into consideration. Obviously, when you implement a CAP, it's not just the city, right? There's a lot of partnerships. There's a lot of people that we have to work with. The school district is really important to work with as well. And, educating the youth and getting them on board and then understanding how their personal choices, makes an impact on climate change is an excellent thing to do. So, education programs and partnerships such as working with the school is definitely part of the CAP effort for long-term success in implementation.
Okay. And then the next one, for the tree question, I would like to add that the Public Works is consistently on the watch for planting trees in public ways and has been planting. Public input on potential sites would be appreciated. And Public Works Department contact info is on our website. I like this comment a lot. This is great. And I think this is something I'm going to coordinate with Lotus on. I see a potential measure in the natural and urban greening opportunity area here to partner with Public Works. I'm not sure how quickly we can turn around the public input on that for the CAP, but I can see that as a measure for a future program, and then to just contact Public Works as we develop those measures. So that's great. Thank you.
Jen, I wanted to just follow up on the food waste question and comment that we received. Lotus, our sustainability manager, shared some additional information about how the city has an Eco Hero program to educate students about food waste. And they are also launching a food trash cart decorating contest to also educate the community and students.
Awesome. And I am watching the clock and how many questions we have left. Looks like we'll probably be able to get through all of them. I think our next one is microgrids are a great idea, local sustainability. So it's a good comment. Thank you. How will Buena Park coordinate CAP efforts with our surrounding cities? This is a really good question. A lot of times our team talks about how your local efforts can have such a greater impact when you partner with the region and other people that are interested in doing the same thing. So interesting thing about Orange County is doesn't have a lot of climate action planning or climate action adaptation planning. There's only a few, but Orange County is in the process of developing them. There's a few other cities that have them or they're developing them. And one of the things we do is work closely with those cities that do have them to coordinate efforts, understand what is working, understand how to adjust to things that maybe are not as working as much as we hoped. Part of this CAP effort is to inspire other cities in the region and hopefully that they follow suit as well. And then they do their own plans and right, it ripples through and makes greater strides. I think I'd just take the moment to say that CAPs are living documents. It's not that we develop this plan and they sit on a shelf. They are monitored for implementation. Usually this is done on an annual basis. And like I said, you have all these really good ideas for actions and some of them work great. Some of them work better than anticipated. Some of them need a little help to change gears. And as part of that, annual check-in and reevaluation of the CAP, we're able to keep on track and maintain momentum by taking a hard look at what's working and tracking these metrics that help us understand that. I know that wasn't an answer to the question, but in my way of answering it, I thought that would be a good time to note that. All right. This next one is acknowledging that the idea of sustainability is a little foreign to Americans, but it's a great step for Buena Park. We'll get there together. Again, I really think that this is an opportunity for Buena Park to lead by example and inspire others, and in the process, of course, make a safer, more resilient, sustainable community that everyone wants to live and work in. Okay. Costa Mesa's organic food waste diversion program is something I think all municipalities should look at, but it is expensive. All right, we'll note that. We can look into that. They're another city in Orange County that's starting their CAP effort, and so one that we will be coordinating with. All right. Is there anyone to the panelists that I'm missing that we want to answer? Maybe I'll invite Shannon to read the last one, make sure I get pronunciation correct.
Oh, well, thanks, Jen. Council member, and I apologize as well. Poke here to add to Mayor On's comments. If folks are interested in wanting a free tree in public right of ways, they can contact Jeff Porter, our street superintendent in Public Works, and I could also the council member had also shared the phone number, which is 714-562-3703. So thank you for that, council member.
Thank you. And once I hit answer live and done, it will post to the answered.
Perfect. Okay. So that could be a good way to record that phone number.
All right. Do you have this one, which I think we're going to have to follow up with? All of the proposals involve giving tax dollars to people and businesses to comply with the regulations you develop. Where is the money coming from? I will say that definitely not all the proposals in a CAP is financial incentive based. There are other ways to incentivize people. And like Michael said, there's certainly co-benefits that this community would benefit from in implementing these. There are other ways to make great progress with climate action. Some of the things that the city is going to do themselves. Some things are going to be ordinance. Those are going to be requirements for, let's say, new development, and that doesn't cost tax dollars. If Michael or Sarah or Henry have other examples of ones, right? Education programs, right? They do take staff effort and time to put together, but they're not funding or using a monetary incentive.
And there's also opportunities, funding opportunities, grant opportunities that the city can go after to fund some of these measures.
Right. And that's a great one to end on that. Yes, funding and grants are definitely part of this.
Jen, I wanted to also follow up. Lotus, the city sustainability manager, had also wanted to share a comment from OCPA that they're working on a community power plan, and they are gathering feedback to figure out what incentives to provide. So this is, she had said more info is coming on OCPA's website.
And I wanted to thank a participant that chimed in and said a good chunk of financial incentives for electrification come from the CPUC, so you already pay it in your electric bill. Folks got one. All right. Well, we have done a great job keeping on track on time tonight. It looks like we have made it through the relevant on topic questions. And of
Sure.
course, I know sometimes the second you hang up is when your question comes to you. So this is a process, and we are open for feedback along the way.
Yeah, Henry, if you want to go to the next slide, I could close us out. I just want to thank everyone again for your participation tonight in the community meeting. We really appreciate your time, your questions, your input. These were some really fantastic questions that you all had shared, which really show that you're really passionate about sustainability and this project. I also just wanted to remind attendees that on the city's webpage at buenapark.com/sustainability, there is that form on the bottom of the webpage where you could provide your contact information, and you will then be just placed on as part of an email list where the city could send you project updates. So that will be a good opportunity for you to stay up to date on this project. But Dudek and the City of Buena Park just really wanted to thank everyone for your time this evening. So thank you very much.